Hey, welcome back. This is Funny Megita Jones. And today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different. It's basically I'm doing a video on how I budget on a month-to-month basis. Since we're starting at the 1st of May, today is May 3rd, I've already done my budget, but I wanted to show you like the process I go through of when I get paid and how I go through determining the numbers that the cash amounts I'm gonna stuff in my cash envelopes. For those of you new here, welcome. I hope you enjoy this video, and those of you returning, welcome back. And if you're returning, you may know that I use prop money exclusively in my cash envelopes, and I use my credit card for all my purchases. So you'll kind of be seeing, I think I'll be mentioning that throughout the video, but just so you know from point of reference, that's how I budget and that's how I maintain my cash envelopes. So without further ado, we're going to just jump into the video. At now is a sample of the spreadsheet that I use on a monthly basis. I've mentioned this before, but just to reiterate, since we're talking about budgets here, I get paid twice a month. I get paid on the 15th and the last day of the month. My paycheck on the last day of the month is used to fund the next month. So since I got paid today, which is April 30th, I actually got paid on Friday, which is April 29th, but today is Saturday, so I get paid the Friday before. This paycheck will fund the first 2 weeks in May. So the spreadsheet that you're looking at here is not my actual salary or my actual rent, but it does serve the purposes for to illustrate how this spreadsheet works, and some of the categories are similar to mine. But I just wanted to give you an example of the spreadsheet. This is the actual spreadsheet I use, but I have as you know, a lot more sinking funds, and that's pretty much the difference. Like I said, the salary is not my actual salary and my rent is not my actual rent, but just for illustrative purposes, that's a big word, illustrative purposes, I'm going to be using these numbers here to kind of show you how the spreadsheet works, and how I basically budget throughout the month. So basically I go into the spreadsheet at the minimum 2 to 3 times a month, depending on if I get some extra income or if I want to tweak some numbers. I may go into it more, but a minimum 2 times a month during every pay period. So on payday, which was yesterday for me, I will go, just as the background, I am a salary employee who is also non-exempt, so that means I'm eligible for overtime. So I have a annual salary that I make, and if I don't do any overtime, I get the same amount every pay period. However, if I do over 40 hours, I am eligible for overtime for that extra time that I did work. So what I do is I usually budget the minimum amount, my salaried amount that I will get paid every pay period, regardless of whether I did overtime or not, or whether I was on vacation or not. And that number goes into this category right here. So the first paycheck is usually going to be $1,500. Like I said, this is not my actual salary. So the first paycheck is going to be, let's say I make $3,000 a month. Each paycheck is going to be $1,500. So that's how much I estimate that I will make every pay period for the last day of the month and the 15th of the month. And it flows over into these two columns here. And so the first column is for the first pay period. And the reason I do it this way was whether I have it under first pay period and the second pay period is you have the option of spreading this one paycheck across the entire month, meaning that you can split it up between $750 and $750, or you can put the entire amount into the pay period that you're working on. So we're currently in pay period 1, which is the last day of the month. And we're going to assume that I did some overtime this month. So we're going to change this to $1,650. Okay. And what this does is when this spreadsheet is set up, so once you change something in one area, it represents it throughout the spreadsheet. So the numbers change and numbers shift throughout the spreadsheet. Okay. So we're going to keep the estimate for my paycheck on the 15th. And on the 15th, I will again check my bank account to see what I was actually paid. And then we will update this number on the 15th of the month. I have another extra column here for extra income. So if you're a person who has a YouTube channel, or you have an Etsy business, or you have just a side hustle where you get extra income from, you could put that number there. So let's say I had a side hustle where I made $200 this month, this pay period. Okay. Now I have the option, I have this one set up where I spread that money across the entire month. But if I wanted to, I could just say, oh, I want to use all that money in this first pay period and just do $200 here. And that'll zero that out. Okay. So for pay period one, it's showing, if we enlarge this, for pay period one, it's showing that I made $1,850 was my total income for pay period one. This income will fund the rest of my expenses, my fixed and my variable expenses, and my sinking funds for the rest of this pay period between the 1st and the 15th of May. Okay? So after we determine what this number is going to be, 1850, we're going to go down here to fixed expenses. Now I put in a couple of fixed expenses, things that I pay out every month that pretty much never change. So like my rent, my Netflix, my internet, my cell phone, these amounts never change. For me, I also have a category, if I can add another row here, I also have a category for my Roth IRA, which I think it's 534, something like that. So for my Roth IRA, on the last day of the month, when I get paid, I put $534 into my Roth. Now, because I have a cushion in my checking account of $500, I can spread this out across the month. I don't have to allocate it for within this pay period. But since I know it's going to come out of this last day's paycheck, let me see. Nope, didn't mean to do that. We're going to put 534 here. What are we doing? We're going to X that out. Put 534 here. Okay, and that's going to end up zero. So we're going to say that 534 is going to come out of this paycheck. And actually, I typically don't do that because I want to give myself a little bit more spending cash. But you can do it either way. You can spread it across the month if you know you have a cushion to do so, or you can put it in the pay period that it's coming out of. So I'm going to undo that and go back to what it was, 534, and spread it out throughout my month. Okay, even though it comes out of my last day of the month paycheck, I am still going to spread that amount out through the entire month because I do have a cushion in my checking account that allows me to do that. Okay. So on fixed expenses, like I said, you can add or subtract columns in here of your fixed expenses. Everybody's will look different, but these are the fixed expenses that I figured most people would have. And so my fixed expenses for this pay period will total $949. Okay. So that gets subtracted from my total income. $949 will sit in my checking account until these bills hit, and they will get subsequently paid throughout the month. I use my credit card for almost all my purchases. And what you see me stuffing in my cash envelopes is prop money to represent what is going to be put in these other columns. So pretty much everything is auto paid. Either it's paid through a credit card or it's deducted from my checking account. So I, on a monthly basis, do not write out a check for any of my fixed expenses. It is auto paid. It gets paid when it's supposed to get paid, and I don't ever have to think about it. So if you are new to cash stuffing, I would say stuff your cash and pay your bills when they're due. The way I do my system is after years of actual using cash to cash stuff my my cash envelopes and then taking that money out and paying my bills. But I wouldn't have been able to use my credit card exclusively if I was just starting out because I was not that disciplined. And it took me like a good 10 years from when I started getting out of debt until I actually got out of debt to be able to be more disciplined with how I use my credit card and how I pay my bills. So everything is auto paid. It's either, like I said, deducted from my checking account, or it is paid on a credit card, and then that credit card payment is auto paid, which is deducted from my checking account. So the reason I'm able to do that is because A, because I budget, and B, because I have a $500 cushion in case any unexpected expense comes through. That $500 cushion in my checking account is virtually invisible I don't touch it. It only gets hit if an unexpected expense comes through. So I hope that makes sense of how I'm able to spread things that I pay for in one pay period out through the entire month because I have a cushion that can cover that. Okay. So if we're looking at it, we have our money in, which is 1850. We're going to subtract basically $950 from that 1850, which gives us $901 in the first pay period to use in our cash envelopes and our sinking funds. Okay. So the only thing, what I try to do is when I cover my expenses, I try to cover my four walls. If you follow Dave Ramsey, he says when you're doing your expenses and you're doing your 3 month, 3 to 6, 3 to 6 month expenses, you try to cover your four walls. Your four walls is your rent, utilities, groceries, and transportation. Those are the things that you need to kind of keep you alive. And so I have the rent and some other stuff up here. I guess you would call, I don't know if you, some people call it internet utilities and cell phone utilities. Netflix is definitely not utilities, and my Roth IRA is definitely not utilities. But those are things that they come through the same amount every month, so I put them up and fixed. The other things that I need to cover every month, regardless of how much money I get in, um, that they are prioritized are my utilities and my groceries. Now, I don't own a car, but I know a lot of people do, so gas would be an important category for them to prioritize over everything else. So, if you're doing a base budget and you're living on a very low income and you want to make sure your four walls are covered, you're going to make sure that your rent, your cell phone, I would say internet is highly important. Your gas and electric, your groceries, and your fuel for your car, gas for your car, are all covered under your income. Once those are covered, then you can start talking about variable expenses and sinking funds. But those are the things that need to be covered in your budget. And I'm sure this is pretty much basic for most people who are in the budgeting community. But for people who are new and just starting out and you're not quite sure where you should prioritize your paycheck and you have a low income and you're paying off debt, those are the first things that you should prioritize above everything else, above your debt, above your savings, above everything else, because you need a place to stay, you need to keep the lights on, you need to eat, and you need to get to work. So those are the things you prioritize. So if we look at my cash envelopes under the first pay period, I determine how much I want to spend for the month. So for utilities, I'm going to spend $100. Eating out, I'm going to spend $20. Fun, I'm going to add $20. Gas, I'm going to add $40. I don't have a car, so that's kind of an imaginary um, expense. Groceries, I'm going to add $300. Household, $10. Miscellaneous, $10. Now, these are my cash envelopes. I don't carry cash envelopes on me when I go out. I just carry my credit card. And I generally know how much I can spend in each of these categories. If I tend to forget, I have a little cheat sheet I keep in my wallet that has these numbers on there, so I know I'm keeping in budget. And plus, I'm pretty good about checking my balances on my credit cards and what I spent and where I am with my budget on a weekly basis. So I usually don't go out of hand, go out of budget accidentally. It's usually an intentional thing. So, and it's usually in the eating out category, as if you've been following me, you know. So anyway, so for utilities, I will budget half of my whole month's budget in the first pay period. And like I said, I can do that because I have a cushion, and usually utilities gets paid, what is it, the end of the month, and my credit card gets paid at the end of the month. So I don't, usually it's already funded before the bill hits. And if it's not, I have a cushion, and then I could just put that $50 in there and we're good. Okay. Eating out, that's a fun expense. Eating out is not a necessity. Fun is not a necessity. Household is not a necessity, but I do fund that. And miscellaneous I use just to cover in case I go over a little bit in any of these categories, or I just have something that I purchased that doesn't really fall into these categories. Okay. So once I've determined how much I'm going to put into these categories for the first half of the month, I get this total that I have put $250 into my cash envelope. So if you look at here, let's say I'm going to estimate $150 into utilities. You will see that these amounts change, $75. And I want to say I want to put $30 in eating out. These amounts change, okay? So these amounts change based on what you put in this category, and then this amount changes. This total for cash envelopes is then subtracted from this 901, which gives me the amount of money I can put in my sinking funds. So whatever I put in my cash envelopes gets subtracted from this 901, and whatever is remaining will funnel over into my sinking funds, and that's how much I know I can use in my sinking funds. So we're going to prop these up a little bit. We're going to say we're going to put $20 in some of these categories. Oops, see, error, $20. And I think we're good. Okay, so that now after making these changes, I have spent a total of $290 in my cash envelopes. That's how much I will be stuffing in my cash envelopes. And I have $611 remaining to go into my sinking funds. So we're going to go into the next grouping here, which is my monthly sinking funds. So if you are just starting, doing this whole budgeting thing and getting out of debt, and once you've covered your four walls, your groceries and utilities, and some of these other categories, whatever you determine these other cash envelopes categories should be, once you've covered those, the other priority should be start saving for your emergency fund. If you do not have an emergency fund, that should be a priority. And you should start with just $1,000, like Dave Ramsey says. That is the baseline you should start with. There's an argument out there that you should do more. I'm kind of in the you should do more camp. But if you know that you can only do $1,000, create your first sinking fund should be your emergency fund, and you should work as aggressively as you can to fund your emergency fund. And once you get to $1,000, or whatever number you determine is good for you to have for initial emergency fund, you can ease off and start adding to some other sinking funds that you have. But your first priority should be your emergency fund, because you don't know what's going to come up, and you don't want to derail your whole budgeting by having an expense come up that you can't pay for or you have to put on a credit card. So that's why emergency fund is first, and I have in here parentheses minimum $1,000. So however you want to budget that out every month, you can. So if I look at this pay period, I have $611 to spend. So if, let's say I want to put $200 into my emergency fund this month, my minimum debt, and that would be, you can break this out by debt amount. You can list them all out, or you can just say, look at the total and say, each minimum balance, minimum amount due on each credit card or each debt that I have totals X amount of dollars. Okay, and that can be an envelope or whatever you want. So you can say, okay, Citibank gets a $20 minimum. Chase gets a $20 minimum. My Amazon credit card gets a $30 minimum, and whatever that total is could go in this amount, or you can list them out however you want to do it. But your second priority after emergency should be paying off your minimum amounts due on your credit cards. So if you feel more comfortable listing an amount and create an envelope for each of those, you can do that, or you could create one envelope for a minimum amount debt due and put that amount of money, total up what those minimums are and put that amount here. Okay, whichever you prefer. Then you can go into whatever sinking fund categories you may have. I would caution, if you're just getting out of debt and you have a lot of debt, don't go crazy with sinking funds. Make sure that you're not taking away from your emergency fund and paying off your minimum, paying off your debt by putting a ton of money in sinking funds. Now, you have the minimum debt here, which is the minimum amounts that you have to pay every month to keep your credit card current. That's what this minimum debt is. But then you also have a debt payoff. So your goal is, by doing this budgeting, and is to, if you have debt, to pay it off. So you may want to start your next sinking fund to be your debt payoff. And like I said, with the minimum debt, you could make that a one envelope that says debt payoff for all your debts or whatever credit card you're working on, or you can do it by credit card. If you're following the snowball method, which is pay off your lowest balance due credit card or your lowest debt by amount, not by interest rate. That is snowball method. So if you like have five credit cards or five debts and the lowest amount is $200, you'll start with that $200. So maybe you can start there. Minimum, you could say lowest debt or current debt I'm working on $200, and whatever amount you want to put extra towards that debt, you can put in that envelope. That does not include the minimum amount you pay on that credit card. So if your minimum amount on that $200 credit card is, let's say, I don't know, $10, you're going to put that $10 in this minimum debt, and then you're going to chunk away an extra amount of money to pay towards paying off that debt. And once that debt's paid, whatever amount you put in there, you go to the next lowest amount. That's the snowball method. The avalanche method is you go by interest rate. So if you're going to go by, you list all your debts, and with the one with the highest interest rate, you're going to pay off first. So however you want to do it, avalanche or snowball, you can make a sinking fund envelope for that as well. Then, so what I'm recommending here, your first three sinking fund envelopes should be your emergency fund, your minimum debt, and then your extra debt payment. Okay. And then whatever other things you might have coming up. Maybe you have car insurance, maybe you have car repairs, maybe you have, I don't know, if you have kids, maybe they have school fees, or maybe you have clothing. You can add clothing in there, clothing and shoes, whatever you want to add as your remaining sinking funds. Maybe taxes on your home or whatever, water bill, things you want to save up to pay for in the future that you know are coming up. Christmas is a big one, holidays and birthdays, all of those. I would add those as sinking funds after you get your first three primary sinking funds out of the way. Okay. And so whatever changes you make in these categories, say if you want a first sinking fund is you're going to pay off, let's say you're going to pay off $500 towards that $200 debt, it changes these numbers. So what this is saying is like, of the emergency fund, the minimum debt, the first sinking fund, the second sinking fund, all these totaled up to $480. That means I have $131 left to spend. So that means I can allocate this $131 however I want. What the goal is to get this number down to zero. So let's say, I have $131 to spend. I allocated all the money into my sinking funds that I wanted to. Maybe I want to put an extra 100 into emergency fund and an extra, and then I want to put into my first sinking fund, I want to put $81. Okay, so now you're down to zero. So that's how a zero-based budget works. If you've ever heard of people using a zero-based budget, it means that you took the money from your paycheck, which was $1,850. That includes all the income you've made for this pay period, which is your salary income plus any extra income you got. You subtracted your fixed expenses, which for this example totaled $949. You subtracted the money from your cash envelopes, which for this example totaled $290. Then from which your cash envelopes for a monthly basis, I'm sorry, the total was $901, which you can put in your cash envelopes and your sinking funds. And you put a $290 into your cash envelopes for this pay period, which gave you a total of $611 to use for your sinking funds. And you rolled that amount over, and you divided that amount among your different sinking fund categories, which I said your priority category should be your emergency fund, your minimum debt payment, and then your whatever debt you're looking to pay off, whatever extra money you're looking to pay off on the current debt you're working on. And once you put in the dollar amounts of all these expenses of your cash envelopes and your sinking funds, this total should be zero. That means you've allocated your money across the board, you told it what to do, and you should have no more money left from your paycheck. So that's how my budget works. So once I've done all this and I've budgeted out and I've decided what's going to go into my sinking funds, I also have a category here for saving challenges. So once I've done, for me, I didn't put saving challenges on here because if you're just starting out, maybe you might not want to focus on saving challenges, but you can add whatever categories you want into the sinking funds slash saving challenges. But I have another category here that says savings challenges, and that's the amount of money after I fill up my sinking funds that I will put in my savings challenges. So once you've done all this and you've determined your paycheck, you've subtracted your fixed fees, you've put money in cash envelopes, and you've done your sinking funds. For me, since I use prop money, I go into what I call the bank and I pull my money out and I pull out the denominations that I need and I go in and I start stuffing my cash envelopes. And I also update my trackers to reflect the amount of money that I currently have in my cash envelopes. So if you see me do that, you see that I pretty much use my trackers, and I also use an app called Personal Capital to help me track my credit card expenses and anything that hits my checking account, my credit cards, and any transactions I make. And the reason I like Personal Capital is because if you're like me and you use your credit card exclusively, you almost never use cash, which I almost never do. If you use your credit card exclusively, the expenses that you make on your credit card, if you tied your credit card to your personal capital account along with your checking accounts, gets funneled into this feature that they have on personal capital called your budget, and it funnels in all your credit card expenses and all your checking account expenses. And for me, whatever the name or well, for me, whatever I have named these categories, like I have utilities, eating out, fun, gas, groceries, whatever, and I have emergency minimum debt, sinking fund one, sinking fund one, two, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I name the sinking fund, let's say I named it Capital One. That was the credit card. That's the credit card I'm looking to get rid of. And then I have car insurance. Then I have birthdays. Okay. Then I have Christmas. Then I have, let's say I have a fun one that says travel. Okay. Let's say these are my sinking fund categories. Now, what I can do in personal capital is when I can make categories to mimic these sinking funds. So I can name one Capital One. I can name one car insurance, I can name one birthdays, and I can name one Christmas and travel. And so when we go to my personal capital account, you can see that each of these categories, I can categorize all my expenses that come through personal capital by each of these envelopes. So when I'm going back to look and see how much I spent on a weekly basis, I can go in and categorize the expenses as they come through. And when I go back to reconcile my cash envelopes against my spent, I can look at these categories and say, hey, oh, look, I spent X amount of dollars in car insurance. I spent X amount of dollars in birthdays. And it gives me a lump sum, a lump total. And then I can just take that money when I'm unstuffing my cash envelopes, just take that money out of my cash envelopes and put it into my spent envelope. And then I can reconcile my spent envelope at the end of my monthly period, which takes place on the last day of the month before I get paid. You should see 4 videos from me that relate to my budget and cash stuffing, specifically to my pay periods and cash stuffings. So you should see a cash stuffing for the last day of the month, which will fund the first 2 weeks of the next month. And on the 15th, you will see a cash unstuffing, which will take into account expenses that were incurred during that first 2 weeks, and then a cash stuffing for the last 2 weeks of the month, and then a cash unstuffing for the entire rest of the month, and then another cash stuffing, which will go into the following month. That sounded very confusing to me. I hope it made sense. So that's how my budget works. It works for me. As I said, I don't use cash. I just don't like going back and forth to the bank. I don't like having large amounts of cash on my person. So this system really works for me. And for people who say it's not real money, trust me, it is, because that real money is in my checking account. And when I go over, I go over, and that real money comes out of my checking account when my credit card is due. So having this visual, having this laid out for me like this, that tells me how much I can spend in each category. And I'm not saying that I don't ever go over. I'm human, I go over. And things happen and you go over, but to have guardrails to show you how much you can spend in each category, and having the cash envelopes to visually show me how much I spend in each category, and keeps me mindful and keeps me on budget. I can't tell you, I did cash stuffing when I was first getting out of debt 10 years ago. And when I finally got out of debt, I was like, woohoo, I don't have to do this cash stuff anymore. I got money in my bank. I got my emergency fund. I can do, I got roughly, I got X amount of money in my checking account. I got a cushion. I'm good. And last July, I had so many subscriptions hit um, all at once that I really wasn't paying attention to. And because the pandemic was going on, because we were still in the pandemic, and I was kind of stockpiling some things and buying extra of things. I had already eaten into some reserve funds that I had, but when those subscriptions all hit at once, it really did kind of like, what is happening? So it kind of like jarred me to go, you know what? You really need to be paying attention to your expenses, and you really need to be paying attention to how you're doing with your spending. And I hadn't seen anybody on the internet doing, I know Hands and Bands. She's the only one I know that does all prop money as well. But I didn't know about her when I first started doing this. And I thought, well, why can't I was on Amazon. I go, why can't I just use this fake money and get the cute envelopes and do it? And for me, that made it fun. It made it visual, and it kept me on track. But I was also at a place where I knew that I could be more disciplined with my credit cards. I just wasn't paying attention, and that's why I wasn't disciplined. But I knew if I put down a budget and paid attention after being out of debt for so long and knowing I would never go back, I knew that I could still use my credit card and use prop money to keep me on track. I couldn't have done this 10 years ago. I would have overspent on my credit card every single month and gotten myself in more trouble. So you have to know yourself. Me 10 years ago couldn't have used my credit card exclusively. Me 10 years now, I can do it. But you know yourself, you know where you are in your your financial journey, and how disciplined or not disciplined you are. So whatever works for you, do that. It's just, as long as you stay on budget and you make it work for you, and you allocate your money accordingly, you should be good. So that's basically all I have for you. I noticed that we saw a little red mark here, a red amount here. So if for some reason, I didn't say this, if for some reason if we're in the second pay period, I've allocated only $1,500 in this pay period, and what I will do in my second pay period is address any amounts that I've allocated over here to make this zero out. So it basically says over here that I am 15, I'm sorry, it basically said over here I'm $307 over budget. So I'm gonna have to just start chunking things down. So I'm gonna make that 200, and I'm gonna make that 100, make that 10, 10, 10. So now it says I'm $90 over budget. So maybe I'll come back and make it 110. So I know I've kind of jumped around the place, but one of the things I like the way the spreadsheet works is when you make a change up here, it is reflected all the way over here. So you know when you plug in numbers how they're going to work and how they relate to each other. So maybe I couldn't put in my second pay period, maybe I just got my base salary and I'm only working with $1,500, okay? So I couldn't put in the full 300, but I did put in 110. I did, maybe if I have to pay 150 towards my minimum payment, that means over here I'm going to have to be taken out. I'm not going to make an extra payment towards Capital One or add anything else to my sinking funds. And that's okay, because you do what you can do with the money that you have. But I did put money in my emergency fund, which is a priority for me. And I did add $150 towards my minimum debt, which I'm supposed to do every pay period. And so therefore I did what I had to do to keep myself current, to add to my emergency fund, and to take care of my four walls. I didn't put anything towards my sinking funds, but maybe next pay period I'll be able to, whether that's $5, $1, or whatever. But the thing is, the great thing about cash envelopes and sinking funds, every little bit counts. So if you're only putting $5 or $1 in here, that's $5 or $1 that you did not have allocated before, that you probably would have spent on, I don't know, something at McDonald's or whatever. But now you have a plan for it. You know that you just can't randomly go out and spend, oh, is it $50 at the movies, because you have a couple sinking funds here that you need to allocate money towards. And if you don't put money towards it, then you won't have anything in those envelopes. So that's what I like about cash stuffing and cash envelopes, because when you allocate to a zero-based budget and you stick to that budget, you actually have more money than you think you do, and you know where it went. So I hope that wasn't too convoluted and confusing, but just wanted to kind of go in and show you guys how I budget. I can't speak for anybody else, but this is kind of how I do it, and how I allocate my funds on a monthly basis. So when you see me with my monthly cash envelope stuffing sheets, this is where those numbers come from, and that's how they've been allocated. If anybody is interested in checking out this form or using this form, I can create one in Google Docs, and I will put a link in my next video, and you can just download it for free. But I like it because, like I said, if I make a change over here, like let's say if I make this $700, $1,700, I did a lot of overtime, it reflects that I have money over here. So that means that now where I had negative, now I have an extra $200 I can play with. So now I can go back and put $50 here, and $50 here. Oops, $50 here, and $50 here, and $50 here, and $50 here. Oops, now I'm over. Let's say 10. Let's do 25 and 25. There you go. So that's what I like about this spreadsheet. I'm horrible at math. If you've seen any of my videos, I'm horrible at math. So the spreadsheet, adding it up for me, is kind of genius for me, and it really does help me keep me on track and make sure that I am absolutely using every dollar at the end of the day. So I'm going to end this video here. I hope this was helpful, and I know this may be a little bit convoluted, but please let me know if you have questions, or if you have ideas or thoughts. Please leave them in the comments. Please like this video if you thought this was helpful, and if you'd like to see more content like this, more on budgeting and how to work your budgets and where your priorities, where I think your priorities should be. You determine your own priorities. This is my suggestion of where I think, if you're first getting out of debt, where your priorities should be. But leave your comments in the comments fields, and let me know how you budget, how you started out, or where you started and where you evolved to. Let me know how that all works out for you. I thank you again for watching and liking and subscribing, and I will talk to you in the next video. Thank you. Bye.